Hi everyone, welcome to our virtual class. Once again, I apologize that we don't have a face-to-face class, but that's just what the circumstances have have dictated. Just to give you an update on the schedule, today we'll be talking about resumes and job applications and things like that. And then Wednesday, we'll be looking at an author named Robert Cialdini, which I think that you guys will love. I mean, he's a very influential figure in psychology, but also in writing. In fact, how he can show you how he can make writing very influential and persuasive, and that's his main thing is persuasion. And so we'll be looking at that on Wednesday. And then also, so today we'll be looking at resumes and cover letters and things like that. And so I apologize if I know that Christy and Donovan and Haley and Crystal, we kind of went over this a little bit last semester, but I've updated this a little bit, and I think that it's still a very good um, little presentation. Although I know that it's crazy what is happening right now with you know, the whole virus thing and everything. So it's probably not ideal situation for people to be applying for jobs and internships, and but nonetheless though I think this is still a good presentation, so so bear with me. And so one of the things, if you look at the first slide here, one of the things that I used to like to do is to have everybody sit across from their neighbor and just talk to them a little bit, and talk about, you know, the challenges that you faced if you've interviewed, what are the job positions like, and so forth. Obviously we can't do that activity unfortunately. So let's get into resumes and job applications. So one of the things that is important to know is that there is kind of what we call a catch-22 about job hunting. And what I mean by that is that if you go in for a job interview, they're going to say, well, what kind of experience do you have? And then you're going to come back and say, well, I'm trying to get a job to get experience. So that's one of the unfortunate things that we all have to face a lot of times, is that you try to get a job to get experience, but you need experience to get that job, you know. Unfortunately, it's something that we all have to deal with. And in itself, though, look at the second bullet point here, though, is finding a job is going to be, in a way, your full-time position. So even as you get close to graduation, you need to start thinking about trying to find a job. And that's going to be your 40-hour per week job, essentially. So, what are some of the most common mistakes that people make when drafting cover letters? Well, I'll just tell you, actually, in this next slide here, and this is a good point. Don't try to be too fancy. What I mean by that is just stick to just basic black and white. You don't have to use, you know, fancy font, style, paper, etc. Just stick to the absolute basic, right? Um, and if you see here down here at the bottom, this last bullet point, employers find this distracting and annoying. And by the way, when I'm telling you about all these things that I'm going to be telling you about, I'm not just talking about from a textbook. I'm actually talking about from employers and also career development people at UCF and Full Sail. And so what I'm telling you is that this last bullet point here, they just find this distracting. If you're going to be using all kinds of different fonts and trying to be fancy, it kind of signals to them that that this person is a d-bag. Okay, um, I'm not going to swear. So, but also though, one of the things to keep in mind is that you want to find a specific individual to draft the cover letter to. Now, once again, this is something that I've heard from employers, not just people in the career development people, but actually from employers themselves, okay? What they say is that, yeah, for some employers, okay, if you're applying to, Apple and Google and places like that, yeah, there's not going to be a specific person to address the letter to. But for the majority of companies that you might be applying to, there is going to be a specific individual that you can talk to. And guess what? Employers are not afraid of that. In fact, that'll be to your benefit, because what they'll do is they'll say, hey, well, this employee or this candidate applied for a position and he or she made the extra step to go out and try to call us and try to find the specific individual to write the letter to. And so from your position, all you have to do is just say, hey, I'm calling. I was applying for this specific job, and I just wanted to know who I should address the letter to. That is not going to be to your detriment. They will actually like that. Okay, so definitely, if you can, find a specific individual to send the letter to, and just address them that way. So try to avoid dear sir or madam if you can, okay? And here is an example of a letter, and you can see here that it's perfect, okay? They have their name and address. They have the person. Remember, it's Mr. or Ms. And always, even if you know that if it's a woman and she's married, always address it Ms. M.S. period. Not Miss, but M.S. period. Um, and then they have their letters. So you can take a look at this. I'll put this up on our files here as an example. But one of the things that I want to mention though is that if you are applying to a position out of state, that's fine. Just let them know that you're applying for a position out of state. As a personal example of this, I can just tell you that when I was living in Michigan and I applied for all these positions down here in Florida, well, I got informed a little bit later on that, hey, we would have liked to have you, we would have liked to hire you, but the problem is that you were in Michigan. We didn't know that you were that you were going to be being down here, So that's just it's a good tip, because I know that a lot of you might be computer science majors or technical writers, and you might be applying to positions out in California, for instance. I mean, I know for example, um, Google, they have headquarters in San Francisco, but they also have places in LA, Austin, um, even Milwaukee, I think. So they have different places, different parts of the world. So just let them know if you're applying, just let them know, hey, I know that I'm applying for out of state, but I would be willing to fly in for an interview or to work at your place in different locations. So just let them know, because a lot of times these employers don't necessarily know that. Okay. Also, don't discuss specific salary requirements. That's going to be taken care of in a different place. Here's one of the things that a lot of maybe new students don't know about applying for a new position is that when you go into it for a job and you get that job, a lot of times the people that you're talking to don't know anything whatsoever about salary. Um, that's something that gets taken care of at the Human Resources Center. So it's not something that you want to discuss in the interview. And then also, of course, be careful about name dropping. Um, and what I mean by that is that even if you know somebody that works for that same company, sometimes it's not always a great idea to talk about them, because, first of all, maybe they don't have a good reputation in in that company. So if you say, "Hey, oh, I know Joe or Lisa, and they work for you, and they love it here." Well, guess what? Maybe Joe and Lisa are not on the employees or employers best list. So just keep that in mind. And then also the other thing too about name dropping is that it just doesn't really look professional. You don't want to just like drop in people's names and say, "Oh, well, they used to work for you, or they worked for you," and it just doesn't really look professional. It looks like you're trying to be too impressive when you're really not, right? Okay. Also, another thing to point out here is that when you do write a cover letter, make sure that it's for a specific job, because this is another one of the things that the employers told me about, is that you don't want to have this impression like, oh, well, I'll just do whatever, I'll just do whatever job you have available. It just looks a little bit desperate, and it doesn't really look impressive to them. So you want to have a specific job that you're focused on. Okay. So give facts and avoid objectives. So don't just say, hey, I'm great at this or I'm great at that. Try to bring out specific tasks that you have accomplished, right? I did this, I did that. Okay, so the cover letter, just in general, I mean, there is no set formula to this, but in general, I guess the three paragraph format that you can follow is just in the first paragraph, tell them why you're writing. In the second paragraph, state your skills and experience. Remember, use facts, not adjectives, if you can. And then third paragraph, close and just say that, hey, it's been great to apply for this, and I look forward to talking to you and telling you more in an interview. Okay, so this is kind of the basic format. You want to have 1 inch margins or even smaller if you can. So this is kind of review for not really MLA necessarily, but you just in general, you want to have a 1 inch margins. You want to have block format, which is different than MLA, but block format is just a line, flush left, single spaced, with an extra space between paragraphs. And I tell you what, I don't have this on my slides, but I'll give you an example of that on the files later this week. Okay. And then of course, obviously, you have your sincerely, your name. Um, by the way, what you see here, where it says your handwritten signature, don't necessarily worry about that, especially if you're typing this, because a lot of times there's simply no way to do that. I mean, technically there are programs that you can actually put your signature, but for the most part though, don't worry about that. Just have sincerely and then your name typed. Okay. Now, one thing I want to really emphasize here is that a lot of textbooks out there make the claim that your resume can only be one page. Okay, and that's pretty much standard. I mean, you go through all the textbooks, they say that. Okay, here's where I'm going to disagree with that, because once again, I've talked to a lot of people in the career development people at UCF and in Full Sail, not really so much at Seminole yet, but I've talked to a lot of people at the career development people, and I've talked to a lot of employers. Okay, I'm going to tell you that the one-page resume is complete nonsense. Okay, employers tell me that if I see a resume that goes on for a page and it's interesting, why would I not turn the page and keep reading it? There's something in higher education called a CV, which is a curriculum vitae, or a curriculum vitae, and those things go on for 30 pages. Okay, now in your guys' case, okay, obviously you're not going to be doing a 30-page curriculum vitae, but it's perfectly okay to have a resume that goes on for more than one page. Okay, so I'm going to disagree with the popular consensus out there in the textbooks. I'm just going to tell you that in the real world, employers don't care if your resume is more than one page. They welcome that. So that's just my 2 cents, and maybe your other professors might disagree with that, but I'm just telling you that your resume can be more than one page. And then the second part of this is that, can you only have one resume? I'm going to tell you, no, you shouldn't. In fact, I can just tell you a personal example. I mean, myself, I have a resume that's for journalism. I have a resume that's for higher education and so forth. So obviously, you can definitely have more than one resume. So don't just be trapped into this thinking that, oh, well, you just have to have one resume. No, you can have different resumes for different positions, for different jobs. That's one of the most important things that I can tell you, is that don't just be trapped into thinking that you have like one career choice. You can have many career choices in many different resumes. The other thing too is that with the resume, keep in mind that it can be chronological or it can be functional. There is no right or wrong answer to this, meaning that your resume can be chronological, meaning that you go in through the certain dates, date by date and so forth, or it can be functional, the skills that you have. Either can be effective. It's more about, you can kind of be the judge as to that. Trust me, when it comes down to it though, when an employer looks at your resume, the most important thing is going to be the interview. So just keep that in mind. And here are some examples. This student, once again, this is functional and chronological. So you can kind of go through these if you want, but the most important thing though is keep your resume to general tips, or general notes. Keep it simple, keep it easy to read. You don't want to include photos or anything like fancy like that. Like I said, just keep it simple. And yeah, some general tips I have is just keep it simple, keep it easy to read. Don't include photos. Just keep it into 1-inch margins or even smaller. And always have the contact information at the top and include the name, phone number, email, physical address, etc. Okay? And once again, this is just an example of what I'm saying here. This slide is that you don't want to um, include all this fancy information. Just avoid saying things like, "Oh, well, I'm a proven leader. I'm a branding expert." Just stick to facts. Once again, businesses and employers, they're going to be way more impressed by you personally. Like it doesn't matter if you worked at a Subway or McDonald's or whatever. They know that, and they were all in that position also. So don't be ashamed by that. Okay, so you don't need to include high school information. Obviously, if you're in college, they know that you graduated high school, so you don't need to include that. Um, and then here are some examples. Once again, I can't really click on these um, with this presentation, but you can go online and you can see, blueskyresumes.com and jobmob.com and so forth, and you can see some sample designs. But don't even get too carried away with this. The most important thing is that you just have your basic information on your resume, and hopefully, when you get an interview, you're going to, shine. So don't worry so much about resumes. And hey, if they don't want to look at your resume, then screw them, right? So, and then also, LinkedIn is a possible place that you can look for positions. It's gotten a little bit bad in recent years, but nonetheless, though, it's still probably a good place to look for positions and so forth. And then in terms of references and reference uh, like letters of recommendation and things like that, it used to be in the old days that you should put references on your resume, but to be honest, most employers at these days they don't really care so much about reference. I mean, it's like somebody gives me references, I'm going to call them. Of course, they're going to say great things and so forth. So references have kind of got a little bit out of style in resumes lately, but it can never hurt to put them on. Um, but usually, one of the things that they would say with references is that it's on your resume. Just put like references available upon request. That's usually the way that most people do it these days. And just in terms of like a follow-up letter, if you do get an interview, it's always a great thing to just say, "Hey, thank you for letting me interview." You don't have to actually physically write a letter, I would say, but just an email. and just say, hey, it was great to talk to you guys. Please let me know if you need any other information, and and so forth. So it's always a good idea to write a letter of response when you get an interview. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about when you go to an interview. Um, they always recommend that you bring a copy of your resume, even though they're going to have it with them anyways. But maybe it just shows a sign of professionalism if you come in and you have a copy of your resume, and maybe even like a notebook, and and it can never hurt that way. But the most important thing, once again, just to emphasize this, is that you want to be honest and genuine. And again, I can just tell you, talking with different employers and so forth, that's the number one thing that they say. They say that, I can have this candidate's resume, and they can be great, and they can be like a 4.0 student and so forth, but I need to talk to them. I need to see them face to face. And in that face to face interview, I can tell if they are going to be my employee or not, right? So the interview is the key, and just be honest and genuine. I mean, I don't care if you have zero experience. Um, if you if your only experience is cutting grass, or flipping burgers at Wendy's, or whatever it might be, that's okay. We've all been in that position before, and just tell me about the experiences that you had, and how you can be a great employee for my company. And that's probably the best tip that I can give um, any student that is listening to this, is just be honest and genuine, and trust me, they will not hold your lack of experience against you. They will embrace you, and they will, as long as you can prove to them that you're going to be a good employee, then you will be hired. So don't worry about that. And there is something too that's called an information interview. Um, I will just tell you that this can be very, very beneficial. I don't know if it works in terms of getting a job necessarily, but you never know. I'll just tell you a story that I don't even, well, I know it's true, but I don't think that this is going to be that this works for everybody. But anyways, though, so this student at at a university here, he wanted to get a job, and but he was just kind of interested in the industry itself, and this was the advertising industry. Okay, so he went in to interview, not even for a job, but just went in to talk to an advertising agency here in Orlando. Actually, it's in Maitland. I won't say the name, but anyways, he went in to just talk to the CEO of this advertising agency, and he said that, hey, I just want to know a little bit about the industry. And it was just like, a 15-minute interview, and he talked to the guy and so forth. And at the end of the interview, the guy said, hey, well, do you have your resume with you? And sure enough, he pulled out his flash drive and gave the guy his resume, and he got hired on the spot, doing it that way. So supposedly the information interview can work in terms of getting a job, but that was not even the guy's intention. That was not even the student's intention. He was not trying to get a job, but it just kind of happened that way. But anyways, though, the point is that with an information interview, it can be a good opportunity to learn from people in your industry. So what I mean by that is that, hey, go up to somebody in your field that you're thinking about, maybe um, maybe getting a position like what they have, and just go up there and just interview them and just say, hey, I just want to know a little bit about your industry. And you can get a lot of good information about that, not just about for applying for a job, but I mean just about the industry in general, whatever your industry that you're going into. So just keep that in mind. Um, Actually though, let me just real quickly go into the last bullet point here. Um, Let me give you another personal story of about this. So one of my friends, he is a financial advisor. Well, he's technically retired at this point, but he used to work for Schwab. And one of the things that he used to talk about is that sometimes you would have these information interviews, and a lot of times, yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's just people trying to get inside information and so forth, and just information how I can apply for a job or what's going on in the industry and so forth. But guess what? Sometimes people that you interview for information interview might have unadvertised positions that they know about. And so sometimes for example, at Schwab, if you go in and you interview for a position, they might know about an unadvertised position that you weren't even thinking about. But guess what? They get incentives to get new employees. So that's one of the interesting things that a lot of people don't know about, is that sometimes you think that you're interviewing somebody, and that's true. You're just getting information and so forth. But guess what? Sometimes they have incentive to get you hired. So just keep that in mind. So kind of interesting. And like I said, sometimes they get a bonus for finding new employees. So just keep that in mind. So one of the questions that I know that at least one student was asking is that in a job interview, what will the questions be like? Like what will they ask? Like what are going to be the questions? Okay. So I mean, some of the things are pretty obvious. Tell me about yourself. What were your responsibilities in your previous positions, or even as a student? What were your responsibilities? What did you study? What did you specialize in? What are some of the challenges and so forth? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And so forth. And I just want to emphasize the last bullet point here. Um, what are your weaknesses? Trust me, employers are not going to uh, have anything bad to say about those things, because guess what? They were all students too. They all had weaknesses. And that's probably the most telling question, this last one, what are your weaknesses? Because they're probably going to be looking at that question more importantly than any other question that they ask. And what they want, again, I had to reiterate, but what they want is you to be very, very honest and open, and just tell about your weaknesses, and just don't shy away from them. Obviously, you're going to talk about your strengths. Of course, you're going to be, a good student. You graduated and so forth. Um, but just don't pay attention to just the strengths. Also concentrate on the weaknesses, and keep in mind, just be honest and open, and you will be fine. They're going to ask you for what strategies that you have for handling stress. Um, of course, just say that, hey, look at right now, like look at the whole virus. Just say that, hey, this was a difficult time for a lot of Americans, including myself, and I was able to kind of, get through class and everything, and everything worked out okay. So, and then talk about a difficult situation and how you overcame it. Okay, so exactly. So just talk about, this situation, or if you ever had a family member who passed away, how did you overcome that, and so forth. And then they're going to ask you for, why are you looking for a new job? Okay, so one tip about this last part. So I know that most of you are going to be freshmen, so you're not really going to have like a previous job necessarily. But in general, though, what you want to say is that you don't want to have anything bad to say about a previous employer. So you just simply say, "Hey, I'm looking for a new opportunity," and or in your case, hey, I'm just graduating college, and I'm looking for a new position. Like I'm looking for to get my start in a new career. And then they're gonna ask you, okay, why do you want this job? Again, just say like, I'm looking for a new career. My future goals are to, depending on your industry, you want to like broaden your like appeal out there, and you want to get a job in your industry, whatever that industry might be. So whether it's automobiles or computers or whatever it might be, you want to expand your horizons essentially. And then your salary requirements, don't say anything about that. That will be taken care of by the human resources department. So you don't really want to get into that. And but if that ever comes up in an interview, which I doubt it would necessarily, well, no, it might, but if that ever comes up and they ask you about your salary requirements, just say that you're looking for the the standard salary for that position. You're not looking for any more or any less. So just state that. Okay, so I think that we're done. I got through this a little bit. Yeah. So I got through all of this actually. Um, so I tell you what, I'm gonna put this up on YouTube, and once again, let me know if you have any questions. Remember that the final Project 3, is not going to be due until Sunday of this week, and starting on Wednesday, we'll look at an author named Robert Cialdini, which I think that you guys will love. And anyways, though, I will close this out, and we'll see you guys again on Wednesday.